Okay, wrestling fans, it's Mike Messier. Special Wrestle Ride with Mike. Tribute to Jim, the Anvil Neidhart, the master of the goatee, and real pro wrestler. I mean, that's what you'd call a guy. He was a pro wrestler. He was a professional wrestler that obviously in his character had a sense of humor. And I'm sure in real life he had a sense of humor. I did get to meet the guy twice, but I never, spent quality time with the man, so to speak. But Jim the Anvil Neidhart came to, I believe, it was the Johnson and Wales University campus in 1996 for a promotion at the time called the NEWA, the New England Wrestling Association, or the New England Wrestling Alliance. I want to say it was the Alliance, not the Association. And he main evented, as well he should, against our champion, the champion of the NEWA, I should say, which I believe, it was a while ago. I want to say the character was a pretty wild character. It wasn't the Trouble Man, but maybe it was the Trouble Man. It was like a kind of a lunatic character, a guy with a mask. I want to say like Jason the Terrible, but that was Lord Humongous or something. But anyway, he main evented. It was one of those championship things where you bring a main event guy in, Jim the Anvil, a main event, well-known name for the WWF, comes into the territory, the independent promotion, put him in the main event right away, and they had a Shabazz finish. It looked like he won the championship, and then there was a Shabazz, and he actually lost the match. So he put our guy over, so to speak. Jim the Anvil, myself and a friend of mine took a picture together, which was a classic Messier picture, of course. Like many classic Messier stuff, it's gone to the wind, unfortunately. Now, many years later, Jim the Anvil Neidhart did a show at Top Rope Promotions. I got to say hi to him. And I didn't mention that. I mentioned that when I was a kid, get this, Capitol Center, Landover, Maryland, I went to see a house show. It was a great house show. It was like May of 85. And they had two matches. It wasn't the British Bulldogs versus the Hart Foundation, which was working its way around the circuit. It was two singles matches. And I want to say Jim the Anvil Neidhart versus Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid versus Bret Hart. So, yeah, I saw those fucking matches live. And I remember that the Bret Hart Dynamite was pretty fucking killer. And Dynamite won that match. And then Jim the Anvil actually beat Davey Boy Smith right there in the Capitol Center, the way I remember it. He kind of used, Davey Boy was charging him into the, whipped Anvil into the corner, and then Jim the Anvil kind of did like a really nice, kind of like a hot shot, like an old Eddie Gilbert hot shot, if you know what that is. And instead of the ropes, he used the top turnbuckle. So if you can imagine just kind of a guy launching himself into you, as Davey Boy did to Neidhart, and Neidhart just kind of used Davey Boy's momentum to propel him into a bear hug type scenario, and then land himself, being Neidhart, pronouns pal, on his own back, propelling Davey Boy's forehead into the top turnbuckle, and then pinning his ass. 1, 2, 3. And I was trying to think before I did this video. I went to the Chinese buffet. I'm in bulking mode, folks, and I'll get into that some other time. But Davey Boy putting over Jim the Anvil right there in the Capitol Center. It was a big show. They had a battle royal. I think they had Hogan versus Greg Valentine for the title. Hogan won. Guess what? But the fact of the fucking matter is this, folks. I could not, for the life of me, think of a big singles victory for Jim the Anvil Neidhart within the confines of the World Wrestling Federation. Maybe if you go back to UWF, or not UWF, but Mid-South or something like that, or Florida, I'm sure he wrestled with guys like The Saint and Barry Darsaw. I'm sure that Neidhart, I don't think he was ever North American champion in Mid-South, but I think he was a top guy in Mid-South. And he did some angle with Crusher Khrushchev. I'm trying to remember what that was, or Barry Darsaw. They were tag team partners. I'm trying to remember if there was another element to it. But yeah, man, fucking Jim Neidhart. I want to say that Jim Neidhart tag team with Magnum TA, Terry Allen, at the 1983 Atlanta Omni Tag Team Tournament. Look into that, folks. If you don't know what that is, see, the Survivor Series, WWE, they don't even do it on fucking Thanksgiving anymore because McMahon doesn't like wrestling on Thanksgiving. Didn't even do Starrcade on fucking Thanksgiving. But the WWE missed out because, you know, fucking Georgia Championship Wrestling used to have this Atlanta Tag Team Tournament. And I get all this fucking food in my goddamn mouth. I don't want to fucking clean my teeth on video. But at this tournament, I believe it was Neidhart and fucking Terry Allen, Magnum TA, teamed up. And I want to say they got all the way to the finals before they lost to Butch Reed and Pez Whatley, of all things. It was really an interesting tournament. I wasn't there. But I read about it in a magazine. So, there you fucking have it, folks. Now, Jim Neidhart, you might be wondering, Mike, are you going to mention the Hart Foundation or what? His claim to fame, kind of his signature thing on professional wrestling, was indeed the Hart Foundation. Now, the great thing about the Hart Foundation, and a friend of mine, first of all, if I didn't give him credit to DG Haven, Pro Wrestling Manager, requested a Jim Neidhart video, so thanks to DG Haven for this video request. And DG has made some requests of me over the years. When, you know, our friend Ox Baker, our mentor, passed away, and it was too emotional to even do it. When Dusty passed away, I couldn't do it. But I guess I'm getting a little bit better around death because it keeps coming. And so this is my tribute to fucking Neidhart. Neidhart and Bret Hart, the Hart Foundation, they were actually, believe it or not, around the WWF. I'm getting a phone call. I have to decline it. I don't know if you can hear that phone. That phone is ringing. But the WWF, they had the Hart Foundation in their area, so to speak, during the time of WrestleMania 1. I want to say that the Hart Foundation came together officially 2 or 3 weeks before WrestleMania 1, as did the Bulldogs, the British Bulldogs. And in theory, if you really pushed it, you could have had a Bulldogs Hart Foundation at WrestleMania 1. And wouldn't that have been nice? If you really look at the WrestleMania 1 card, there's some room for improvement, because you had Magnificent Morocco, wasn't even on that card. And he was in the WWF at the time with Mr. Fuji as his manager. So you had some things that could have been tweaked. You could have had a Steamboat Morocco match at WrestleMania 1 if you wanted to, which would have started their feud. You could have done a lot of things. But that was more of a time when, with the WWF, it was really like the top 4 or 5 matches. That was your stuff, you know? And you wanted to have these undercard matches that were squash matches, more or less. So they don't do that now. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff they don't do anymore. But Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Bret the Hitman Hart, the Hart Foundation, it was so cool that they all had Hart names, and Jimmy Hart. I mean, what a perfect fit. There's this classic Saturday Night's Main Event. It might have been the 2nd or 3rd or 4th Saturday Night's Main Event. Maybe it was all the way into 87, but they were wrestling the Killer Bees. So I think this was the summer of 86. And the show starts off with all these little vignettes and interview shits. And basically it's Neidhart rubbing his goatee. And then, well, Jimmy Hart, I think, starts it. And it's super close-ups on these guys. And Jimmy Hart has the sunglasses. And he's like, I'm Jimmy Hart. And then Neidhart, I'm Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And then Bret Hart, I'm Bret the Hitman Hart. And we're the Hart Foundation. And what do you do with a killer bee? You could squat it. You could spray it. Or you could squish it. And so they basically say that they're going to kill, like murder, their opponents. Now, it's all in good fun. They're not going to really kill B. Brian Blair and Jumping Jim Brunzell, but they're going to beat them up. And I want to say the Hart Foundation won that match, or maybe they lost to the fucking Bees. People always talk about the Bulldogs Hearts match, but the reality of the situation is this. Don't sleep on those Killer Bees fucking Hart Foundation matches. And what a pity that those two teams, as far as I can recall, never wrestled at, I want to say, they never wrestled at fucking WrestleMania or anything. I'm trying to remember if they wrestled on a Survivor Series. Maybe the first Survivor Series, they were on opposite sides. I guess they were. Survivor Series was always a good night for Jim Neidhart, especially maybe the first 3 or 4 Survivor Series when you get the team with Bret. Look, Bret Hart, you know, all bullshit aside, and you got to feel for Bret now because everybody's kind of pointing out this meme or whatever the fuck you want to call it, an image of Bret in color and the rest of the 97 Hart Foundation in black and white. And I get that, you know, they basically the point is that Bret's the only one still alive, and I understand that. And it's got to be a sinking feeling for Bret right now. I mean, I get that feeling, and it sucks. Your friends have passed away, and you're the last man standing. So it's not cool. And if you look at like the Degeneration X, China and Rick Rude are not with us anymore, and that sucks too. So point of the fucking matter is this, and I know I'm not mentioning every single tag team match the Hart Foundation ever had. I mean, I think you guys are going to get plenty of tributes like that, like, oh, and then he wrestled this guy. I'm just giving you a guttural reaction. It was interesting in 1988 when Bret Hart turned babyface, or good guy, so to speak, based on that whole Battle Royal shabazz with Bad News Brown at fucking WrestleMania 4. And Jim just kind of turned babyface too. Like, they never even had a storyline for Jim, except he was loyal to fucking Bret. But maybe I'm forgetting something with the Rougeaus and Jimmy Hart. I think they did some shabazz there. I went to the goddamn Chinese buffet. I'm sorry, but I'm in Balkan mode. I have this whole thing going on. And I mean, it's just very personal, so I won't talk about it. At least not in this goddamn video. Jim Neidhart, 1990. Hart Foundation finally gets their first and only babyface title run, unless you count that false, loss to the Rockers and then getting the belts back. I don't know if I count that as a second, a third title run. You can't really count that. But the Hart Foundation had a couple of great runs. They had a great run as a heel team in 87. And back then, like a gap between 87 and 90, maybe it's because I was younger, but it seemed like forever between those two time periods. Like, there's a huge difference between WWF 1987 and WWF 1990. And it's hard to put that all in one video, but just the difference. The other thing is, I'd say that the Hart Foundation in 1990, you kind of had the feeling that Bret was just kind of waiting and itching to go solo, because he had done the Bad News Brown feud, and then he was put back with fucking Neidhart. And he kind of felt like, I don't want to say slumming, but you're kind of just waiting, like, why is this team still together? But Bret eventually would do his own thing. And we know Jim Neidhart, tried. And then, Bruce Pritchard and others will tell personal stories of Jim Neidhart. Obviously, I was not in the company. I have no inside knowledge on any of that stuff. Just what I've heard, you could easily find on Something to Wrestle if they talk about Jim the Anvil. Interestingly enough, in 93, he showed up in WCW for a couple of matches. I found Jim Neidhart beating Mustafa Saeed of the Gangsters today. And somebody shared that in the Generating Heat podcast group. Mustafa Saeed, yes, of the Gangsters. I'm running out of time on this, but if you want to watch some great fucking Hart Foundation matches, dig into your Hart Foundation beats the Bulldogs for the belts, which was like September, October of 86. WrestleMania 3, Hart Foundation teams with Danny Davis against Santana, the Bulldogs. I would probably fast forward to Hart Foundation, was it versus Demolition at SummerSlam 90? If you could find any Hart Foundation's Killer Bees, like September of 86, Saturday Night's Main Event. Calgary Stampede, if you haven't watched that yet, you're overdue to watch that 10-man tag. Some of these house shows that I saw, I don't know if they're on video. And if you really dig into the corridors of Mid-South Wrestling, Mid-South Championship Wrestling, find some Barry Darsaw, Jim Neidhart stuff. But Mike Messier, paying my respects, Neidhart. You fucking earn yourself a tip of the goddamn hat, a token of the glasses to Mike, from Mike to the Neidhart, to the Rhino. Jim Neidhart, rest in peace, big man.